woke up sweaty and in a daze. Most nights this is normal for me, but tonight something felt off. My bedroom seemed strange, as if something had shifted in the atmosphere. I reached out for my phone, the familiar glow illuminating the time. Midnight. 7 more hours of rest lay ahead before work, but rest was the last thing on my mind. I turned my gaze toward the open door, where the faint yellow light from our porch seeped through the cracked blinds next to the front door. Something about that light felt unsettling tonight. Sighing heavily, I turned back to my wife, her back facing me, sleeping soundly. For comfort, I traced my fingers gently down her spine and attempted to drift back into sleep. Moments later, I woke up again, drenched in sweat. This time, a dry cough clawed at my throat. Not wanting to wake my wife, I suppressed it, but the discomfort was unbearable. I rose and made my way to the kitchen, guided by the dim porch light that filtered through the apartment. Small and modest, our 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment was easy to navigate, even in the dark. I grabbed a cup from the cabinet and filled it with water. The sound of the liquid pouring into the cup was oddly amplified in the unnerving silence of the apartment. Something about the stillness didn't feel right. As I drank, my eyes drifted toward the window next to the front door. The porch light illuminated a thick, unnatural fog outside. Curious and uneasy, I lifted a single blind to peer through. The world beyond was a void of swirling white. The usual row of parked cars was invisible, the black asphalt barely discernible through the fog. A faint, uneasy feeling gnawed at me. Dropping the blind back into place, I turned back to the kitchen. As I moved, the light on the floor shifted subtly. I froze. A shadow, a thin black line cut through the light, spilling onto the floor. Something outside was blocking it. My pulse quickened as I crept toward the door, ensuring the lock and deadbolt were secure. A minute passed in tense silence as I stood there, staring at the shadow, my mind racing with possibilities. Feeling the weight of dread settle over me, I retreated to the bedroom. My eyes remained locked on the shadow as I sat on the edge of the bed. Reaching out, I placed a hand on my wife's back, her steady breathing reassuring me that she was still there. Yet sleep eluded me as I sat, vigilant, watching the shadow. Time passed, my eyelids grew heavy and my body begged for rest. Blink, yawn, blink. When I woke again, the shadow was gone. Relief flooded me as I glanced at my wife, still peacefully asleep. Checking the time, I frowned. Midnight again? That didn't make sense. My throat still felt parched, so I headed back to the kitchen. There, on the counter, was the glass of water I had poured earlier, untouched. A chill crept over me. The nightmare felt too real to dismiss. A knock shattered the silence. Faint but deliberate, it echoed through the apartment. My heart pounded as I approached the door. "Hello? Is anyone home?" A soft, feminine voice called out, filled with an unsettling mix of fear and urgency. Peeking through the blinds again, I saw nothing but the impenetrable fog. Then, as my eyes adjusted, I spotted it. A figure at the edge of the light. A headless body stood there, motionless. The figure swayed slightly, dark streaks of something viscous trailing down its torso. Terror gripped me as I realized this was no mannequin. The air felt thick and oppressive as I examined it further, searching for any hint of rationality. Then a low humming sound filled the air, subtle at first, but steadily growing louder. I followed the sound upward, my eyes catching something just above the doorframe. Its head floated there, hair hanging limply, eyes hollow voids, and mouth agape. Black streaks dripped from its severed neck. My stomach churned as the disembodied head tilted slightly, its lifeless expression fixed on the door. "Hello? Could you come outside, please?" The voice came again, though the head did not move. It was as if the words emanated from nowhere. I stumbled backward, fear overtaking reason. Running back to the bedroom, I shook my wife awake, or at least tried to. She remained unresponsive, her peaceful expression unbroken. Panic surged as the knocking resumed, louder and more forceful this time. I glanced at the window, hoping for clarity, only to see more figures emerging from the fog. They were varied in size and shape, some standing, others floating eerily. A cacophony of bangs and knocks erupted from every window. My breathing quickened as I turned to the spare room. There, floating outside the window, was another headless figure, its movements unnervingly slow and deliberate. I raced back to the bedroom, my heart hammering in my chest. My wife was gone. Desperation overtook me as I shouted her name, but no response came. The knocking intensified, each bang. The chaos, I heard her voice. "Babe? Hello? Are you okay?" Her voice was soft and familiar, but it felt wrong. Off like a recording played just out of sync. "Come outside," she said again, her tone almost pleading. I froze, my mind unraveling as the realization struck. Whatever was outside wasn't human, and now it wanted me to join it. The banging continued, relentless and deafening. Every light in the apartment flickered. My vision blurred as tears streamed down my face, my sanity slipping away. The last thing I heard before everything went dark was that same eerie voice. "Please, come outside."